Hi there and welcome to the Style Sessions. My name is Roger Mittag. If you've been watching us all along, you know how this works. If you're joining us for the first time, that's great. We're here to tell you a little bit more about beer styles and more about traditional beer styles than anything else. And today I'm thrilled to be showcasing a very, very unique style that comes under a few different names, and that is the Saison. A lot of times people will also refer to this as a farmhouse ale, and we'll explain where all of that comes from. The beer that I'm going to focus on today is going to be the one that brought the style back to the forefront and is really the major icon in the way that this style is perceived to be now, and that is Saison from Belgium. So as we've done in the past, I'm going to pour it for you first, and then we'll talk about the tasting notes and the characteristics that you should find in a typical Saison, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the history while we're enjoying our beer together. So I'm using today a Gaetan tumbler, very typical style that you're going to see in Belgium, and it's very unique because the base of the glass is quite heavy, but it's also ribbed. And it's ribbed so that this is where your hand is going to be, and it's designed to keep your hand away from the beer to allow it to stay nice and cold, because Saisons should be consumed nice and cold. Big wide open mouth, there's good frothy head on this as well. So this is a re-fermented beer, this particular one from Saison, but there are multiple other breweries around that are making great Saison styles, and one that comes to mind is a great one in Norfolk County in Ontario called Muse, and Muse does some amazing Belgian beers, but I really like their Saison as well. A few others, but anyway, let's pour and open up. So this is nice and cold coming out of the fridge. We're going to be very gentle at first, because Saisons are very effervescent. They have a lot of foam going on, a lot of CO2. So I'm getting close to the top, so now I'm going to, you can see how much foam there really is. And I wasn't very careful on this one, so sometimes mistakes happen like that. But we're just gonna get a quick towel, we're gonna dry that off. And let me just reach underneath, grab a towel, and wipe it up, and then we can proceed. I feel a little bad that that's happened, but whatever, you know, it's part of life. That's how we learn. One thing I will show you in a sec is the size of the bubbles on this. So if you can see that, you can see that the bubbles inside the glass are pretty bold. They're pretty big, and they're bursting very quickly. Typically the foam on beer is based on protein from hops, based on protein from the malts as well. Saisons have really interesting characteristics because they're not necessarily always 100% malt. We can't be sure of that either. So there is quite a bit of sediment in this particular beer. So you can see that it's quite bright and very nice light golden, lots of effervescence on the inside. You can see that. But I'm going to add a little bit of the yeast in here too. So it's going to change the way the beer looks, smells, and tastes. And I'm going to get this big, rocky, pillowy head on it. So we'll just leave that right there for now. But you can see, I don't know if you can see this in the video or not, but there's quite a bit of particulate in this particular beer. There's a lot of little chunks, and that is primarily yeast that has flocculated or come together during its time in the bottle. It isn't necessarily something that is the most attractive thing to see. It's not going to hurt you at all. It's just basically a little bit of yeast and a little bit of protein in there. Big, nice, white, frothy head on there. Great smell. I love Saisons. They're really thirst quenching. So what you should look for in a typical Saison is that golden color. Normally speaking, you're going to see them being anywhere from hazy to cloudy in appearance. So hazy means that you can see a little bit through there, like this particular one. Cloudy being completely opaque. You can't see anything through there. On the aromatics, Saisons are very unique in that they have quite a spicy nose to them. So you're typically going to get white pepper, black pepper, that kind of spice. And then a little bit of acidity and tartness on the nose. So almost like a sour apple, crab apple kind of characteristic. Those are the two big ones. You might pick up other things from Belgian yeast. You might pick up other spices like cloves. You might pick up things like bananas, pear. There's a bit of funk in here too, and when I say funk, I talk about a little bit of mustiness that you get from the yeast, from typical farmhouse yeast. And you might get a little bit of those barn characteristics, and that's what we really are talking about. Really spritzy and lively, almost champagne-y in the way that it approaches in your mouth. It's a really quick finish. It's got a little bit of an aftertaste, and it's more of a dry bitterness than anything else. I really want you to think about champagne in the way champagne behaves after you've swallowed. You're going to get the same kind of characteristic in most Saisons. Flavor-wise, we're going to get a little bit more of the bread notes from the malts. You're going to get a little bit of bread crust. Still are probably going to get a little bit of that tartness and astringency in your mouth, so it's going to dry everything out really nice. These are major easy drinking beers because of their dryness and their high carbonation. They really are quite dry, so they make you want more, in which case we're going to have more. Okay, let's pour the rest of this in there. It's going to change to opaque now. You can see that it's become dark golden in color, and that's really because of the yeast. This one is, I think, 6.5% ABV, so Saisons, modern Saisons are higher in alcohol. And so let's get into the background of these unique style beers. And first time that we really have any recorded evidence of the name Saison being used was in 1730s in Wallonia in Belgium. And Saisons are known as farmhouse beers because farmers throughout the Middle Ages and going into the 1700s would need something to feed to their workers to keep them hydrated. And so farmers would pretty much make beer on their own, as most household communities did at that time. But the farmers would just use anything at their disposal. So it was really hard for us to sit and understand what a true recipe looked like before the 1730s, because one farmer would use wheat, one farmer would use barley, you'd use other ingredients in there, so it was rather difficult. So nowadays, these modern beers pretty much go off of what Saison DuPont has created. So there's probably a little bit of wheat in there, there's still majority barley. So why are they called Saisons? That's because the seasonal workers that worked on the farm were called saisonniers. And so these beers became known as Saisons because they were feeding the saisonniers from time to time. So the style died in the 1600s and was brought back to life by DuPont Saison in the 1700s. And now we see a lot more brewers going down this road. Now the interesting thing is that typically speaking, there's a very specific yeast strain that's used in making Saisons. It's called diastatic. So diastaticus is a very unique strain of yeast because what it does is it breaks down any long chain sugar and carbohydrate in the beer and continues a fermentation process. So a lot of times these beers, when you put them in bottles and cap them, fermentation continues until you actually open it and drink it, which is why we have those clumps of yeast inside. But they are really easy beers to drink. Unique beer style. Farmhouse is a good name for it. The other type of farmhouse beer that you would get would be a darker one, and more on the French side of Belgium would be known as a bière de garde, and it would be a little bit sweeter and not quite as effervescent or tart. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed our talk on farmhouse beers or Saisons, and we hope you join us next time. So next time, just give you a little peek into what we're doing, we are continuing into Belgian beers. So next time we're going to talk to you about a Belgian Double, and I hope you'll join us for that. And we're featuring in the next one Westmalle Double. See you later. Have a great week.